3. It was cold and windy and overcast when I finally slipped out of the building with my pushbike. Mother dear was still nagging about work and the state of the nation as I left. I think I might have had a headache. Her nagging always gave me headaches. From the road I could see her small figure standing by the window. Her mouth was moving and she was saying all sorts of things of which I could hear nothing. She was still nagging. Of course, I was nodding my head in complete agreement with her, smiling like a champion all the time, and when I was finally ready to pedal off, I gave her the A-OK and thumbs up sign. Yes, mother, I shall certainly be home with news of work. Once out of visual range, I slackened off the enthusiasm with the pedals and started to ponder the dilemma of where I was to spend the rest of the day. As I had absolutely no intention of finding a job, I tried thinking of old friends that I could visit, and there were, unfortunately, none. Everybody was still at school, but that was a comforting thought. They were, most likely, studying. Ha ha. I reasoned that if I could come home each evening desolate, depressed, exhausted, but still doggedly determined to find a job, their enthusiasm for me being employed might diminish and eventually disappear. But then there was always the vicious threat of that old tosser Nigel, or the stock exchange. To get out from being snared by either of those two things was going to require some wily ways. These were the things I thought about as I pedalled up Sloane Street. 10 minutes passed of aimless cycling. I had travelled at least half a mile, and having strenuously avoided exercise for all of my schooling, that half mile was a punishing one. Now knackered, I sat on a bench at Hyde Park Corner. I watched the cars, I ate chocolate, and the tourists took it in turns to take pictures over by the big stone monument standing in the middle. Then something wonderful happened. I was watching this old granny whilst wrestling with a piece of toffee, and she was cycling hell for leather on her granny bicycle around the roundabout when this wanker of a cab driver suddenly cut her up. She almost got pushed into the curb and could have fallen and broken something. She didn't though, she stayed upright, and when she caught the cabbie at the light, for it was red and he had to stop, she smacked him one. Hit him right on the hooter. She was magnificent. I cheered for her and the cabbie fled, jumping the light. So I stayed in the square a little longer, half hoping to see something else before I cycled down to Victoria to play the arcades down there with the 50p I had in my pocket. And these horses came. There were about 5 of them, led by a fine-looking woman, a little stout, wearing unnecessarily tight riding trousers of a creamy colour, a hat, and holding a whip. Behind her I saw 2 Arabs, and the others I couldn't see too well. They slowly came my way. And all of a sudden, above the sound of the big buses and the diesel-engined cabs and the cars and the trucks, I heard a powerful motor howl. The sound came from Knightsbridge, and it gave the effect that whatever it was moving much faster than anything else. Some American tourists, who had been studying the inscription on the stone wall behind me, were also attracted and curious to discover what was making such a racket. Just over the car roofs in the distance, bent over backwards in the wind, I saw an aerial. The man on the motorcycle was flying through the traffic, carving a sweet line through the buses and the cabs and the cars, utilising all 3 lanes of the busy road, swooping from one lane to another and back. I was watching him when the horns went off, and when I turned back to look at the roundabout, a little man in a blue Mini with a balding head had his window down and was shouting filthy obscenities at the big woman. The big woman raised her hand, just like they do in the cavalry. Her troop stopped. More horns. She shouted at him, "Run along, little man!" The little man didn't feel like running far and continued to tell the lady what she should do with herself, how she should do it, where it could be done, and with whom. He thought about getting out of his car, but fear got the better of him when she raised her horsewhip. He quickly drove off amidst more horn blowing, and I think that this was what flustered him and caused him to stall. By this time, the motorcycle man had travelled all the way along Knightsbridge and was now ready to attack the roundabout, but his entrance path was blocked by the fool in the Mini. When he hit the brakes, the sound was something terrible, hideous squealing and rubber tearing, as the motorcycle started a long fishtailing slide. I turned away. When I turned back, the motorcycle had hit the car, but only as a glancing blow, and now the bike was parked up by the curb in front of me. "Did you see that?" said the motorcycle man, lifting his visor. "Most of it. I said, getting up from my bench and walking across. The man took his helmet off. He hardly had any hair, and his face was as gaunt as any face I've ever seen. We started talking, mostly him shouting in fact, about the lack of a rear right indicator and what action he, the skinhead, was going to take on the driver of the Mini. He was going to kill him. This was all said in a rush as he struggled to get his leather gauntlets off, as he propped the machine on the side stand, and as he ran into the road, causing more cars to squeal and making me stand behind as principal witness. That poor Mini driver, he was quaking in his boots, shooting nervous glances at the rapidly approaching leather figure, all boots and black leather. He was also trying to persuade the horsewoman to come to his assistance, but she did not want to know, and spurred her horse on its way. When the Mini-Man had been marched over to me by the scruff of his collar, the tall, booted and leathered skinhead asked me, "Whose fault was it?" I pointed at the poor wretch hanging by his shirt collar. "Too fucking right it's his fault. Look what you fucking done, you fucking bastard," said the skinhead. We all assessed the damage. "That fucking stall will cost you 30 fucking quid at least, plus loss of fucking earnings. Means I'm gonna have to fucking charge you for the fucking time spent going to the fucking shops to buy a fucking replacement. I mean, look at it!" And so it was, and so too would be the little man with the hairy brows and no hair. I can't pay you £30, the little man stammered as he tried to loosen his collar to allow air to travel to a face that was red and glowing. But the skinhead wouldn't loosen his grip and was adamant about the price. Then the Americans joined in. "I don't think you're being very fair, young man," drawled a deep southern accent belonging to a large and aggressive-looking woman in a loud check suit. "You what?" said the skinhead. "It weren't his fault." "Who's asking your opinion, Topo?" "I was watching you young man driving that devil-possessed machine of yours, and I could have swore an accident like this would have happened. You was just driving plumb plain too fast, and I said to my husband, I said, piss off. Go on your bike." "Now, there ain't no cause for you to be rude, boy. My husband, Archie, The skinhead interrupted her, moving close so that his face was barely 6 inches away from hers. "Shut up, you blithering idiot," he said very slowly. Then he smiled. For a moment, the skinhead, as my mother would say, pulled the wind from her sails. But it was only for a minute. "Archie, did you hear what that boy said to me? Well, did you?" "Yes, dear," said Archie. "Well, what you gonna do about it?" Old Archie wasn't too sure. He turned his head away from the argument and looked meditatively up towards the grey sky. The wind had started to blow off the park, and it rustled his short silver hair. "Well there," he said after a while, "maybe we should sort of leave these people sort their own problems out." "Spoken like a fucking general, mate. A right general," the skinhead cooed, smiling. "No, Archie," the lady went on. "As members of the People's Church of South Carolina, we have an obligation here, a moral obligation to save people from sinners. And Archie," she said, turning from her husband to face the big, booted, gangly leather man, "this man is a sinner." Good luck, lady, I thought. She was a fine hen, and looked most impressive with her jowls bloated and the fire in her eyes, but the skinhead looked plain mad, demented even. He smiled and said, "How'd you like a slap round the chops?" Here's where I stepped in, explaining to them all the causes of the accident, the horsewoman, the Mini, and all the time being very careful to avoid the issue of the motorcycle's speed, knowing that this skinhead had a pair of large and rather well-used looking knuckles. And to conclude, I suggested that the Americans should leave while still in full possession of their faculties and features. Archie, being a born leader and a wise old soul, responded to the call immediately, placating his warmongering wife and leading the group away. "Fag," said the skinhead, holding out an open pack of number 6s. "No thanks," said I. "So what's it gonna be then?" said the skinhead. "Cash or cheque? I don't mind which. I'm not a difficult man." And with that said, he lit his cigarette. "I don't have £30, the little man replied meekly. "Oh, come, said the skinhead. "You jest. Every mini driver in London has to have at least £30 on their person when operating such a vehicle. It is a necessity. It is? Yeah, because bits always fall off minis, don't they? I mean, take that number plate for example. Look what happens if I give it a swift kick. The skinhead let go of the man's collar and ran to the car and kicked it in the boot. The number plate dropped off. He brought it back to us. Now, he continued, how much is one of these? 30 quid at least, innit? Eh? The little man nodded. So what do you do about it? The little man didn't know. Well, I'll tell you then, squire. You keep some cash on your person in case of accidents and other such misdemeanours. So the thing is, have you or haven't you £30? Because if you haven't, I might have to do a check on your Mini and see what else falls off. I mean, I can't have you driving around the place with bits falling off. It'd be dangerous, wouldn't it, eh? I think I have got some money. Oh, just remembered it, have you? That's good. I thought you might have some somewhere. You just needed a little surprise to jolt your memory. The little man and the skinhead went over to the car, and soon the skinhead came back counting his money. The little man packed his number plate in his back seat and drove off, white-faced. What do you do? I asked. I'm a mugger. No, for work. He spat on the pavement, and when he had finished counting his money, he looked up and said, dispatch rider on the Brum Brum. Oh, what'd you do? Nothing. Unemployed? Thankfully. The skinhead smiled. The idle rich. What a fucking life. What's it like? Is it good, eh? Not bad. What about dispatch riding? What's that like? It's better than football. I get in a ruck every day on the road. Yesterday was my best day ever. Why, did you make a lot of money? Nah, had 4 rucks. 2 Cortina drivers, 1 cabbie, and got pasted by a trucker. Fucking magic it were. Strange man, I was thinking. Well, how much money do you make? None of your business. When I asked him if he made over £100, he scoffed at the suggestion and said that not even the worst riders in the company made less than £130 a week. £130 a week just to ride a motorcycle? What a job! What do you do then? I deliver things. Just then, a loud crackling voice started speaking from a speaker that was attached to a black plastic box at the rear of the cycle. Chopper! The voice wailed. Where you been? I got clients on the phone and they screaming at me. What happened? Talk to me, boy. So this skinhead called Chopper did, talking into a small microphone, a little black thing, that hung from the handlebars. The voice wailed again, screaming and ranting some things about the importance of his client and some other things about his health and perhaps no job for Chopper if he didn't get his arse in gear. He was plenty mad, this voice. Chopper put a glove in the speaker, and when that did little to shut the voice up, he turned the radio off. When I asked him who it was that was screaming like that, Chopper sighed, saying it was Stanley. Stanley was the controller, the man who gave out the jobs, the man that made you money. Here, said Chopper, take one of these. I took the sticker that he passed me and put it in my pocket. It was a rocket dispatch sticker. Tell me, I asked Chopper, how fast does that machine of yours go? He said some figure that I didn't believe possible, and I watched him flick up the side stand, start the motor, snick it into gear, and drop the clutch. That machine made a hell of a racket, but it went really quick, and I think he was showing off for my benefit. Or maybe he was insulted that I didn't look like I believed him. Whatever it was, he popped an enormous wheelie into the traffic after we said so long, and it made me smile. Afterwards, I went down to the arcade and got in a couple of games on the Invader machine before the money went dry. I was mighty pleased with myself for having topped the score and left my autograph in the number 1 and 2 place on the electrical scoreboard thing. Then, with the sun out, I thought I'd go up to the park and see the ducks and get some kip on the grass. I saw a couple of jobs posted in these pretty grimy shop windows, and I must say I wasn't tempted at all. It only being Wednesday, and not the weekend, there weren't an awful lot of people in the park, except at lunchtime of course, when all the little secretaries came flooding into the place looking for a suntan. I didn't see many pretty ones though. In the afternoon, when the wind died, it was quite hot. I fed the ducks with some of my chalk ice, I rode around, and I slept under a big old oak. Come the evening, I was ravenous, and even the sight of dear old Mama's cooking could not prevent me from putting fork to mouth. Job talk wasn't too bad, though there was some mention of the possibility of a job at the stock exchange. For most of dinner, I was still in the doghouse over the matter of school. It normally took them about a week to adjust, and so after saying that I was sure I'd have more luck finding something in the morning, and that I was feeling really tired having cycled all over the place today, I went to my room. Once inside, I locked the door and scarpered out the window onto our neighbour Mrs. Broad's roof, clambered up the pipe to our roof, and then once there, I slipped down the fire stairs at the back and went to see my friend Jim. Thursday, I did pretty much the same as Wednesday. I played in the arcade, walked in the park, I even went down the King's Road to look at the freaks. Then, that night, old Dad said he'd fixed up everything for me, and I could start as a runner in this place in this... Thursday, I did pretty much the same as Wednesday. I played in the arcade, walked in the park, I even went down the King's Road to look at the freaks. Then, that night, old Dad said he'd fixed up everything for me, and I could start as a runner in this place in the city on Monday. Suits, just like school, and what was worse, the hours were longer, and you were inside all day. No! I cried. Yes, James, Monday. In desperation, I said the first thing that came into my frightened mind. But I have a job. You do? Well, why didn't you tell us about it, James? Said my father. I could have sworn his face fell. I was flailing now. And then it came to me, clear as water. I'm going to be a dispatch rider. I found the job today. Went and had a little chat with the man that owns the place, but he's not completely sure I can start. But I'll find out tomorrow. A what? My mother said. And I told her, and she asked me again, and I explained it to her. And then she said, oh, how common. Thinking about it that night, it didn't seem such a bad idea. I'd be outside all day. It would certainly beat working in my dad's office. And besides, I liked dirt bikes, and had ridden a lot of them over the years. There was the small problem of having no machine to ride, but I soon overcame that, deciding to offer my services as a pedal man. And the more I started thinking about it, the more enticing the idea became. I saw it as a cowboys and Indians sort of thing. If you thought about it like that, it could almost be fun. It was as if those men on the bikes were like the horse messengers in the West, and everybody else, the cars, the cabs, the buses, were the savages. No better and no worse. Only if these savages ambush you by causing accidents, then scalping must be done to the wallet before a rider can continue his perilous, no, adventurous journey through the heartland of the metropolis. I believe I slept with a smile on my face that night.